Hey Valley Kids, welcome back to another math video. Tonight we're going to be multiplying decimals with negative numbers. But before we do that, let's go to our trivia question of the day. How many lakes are there in Minnesota? And the license plate is wrong. All right. Officially tonight, our target is I can multiply decimals when one or more of the numbers are negative. Let's do this thing. All right. Connor charged a pizza on his credit card at Pizza Luce on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Each pizza was $13.25 with tax and tip. If these are the only three charges on his credit card bill, what is his credit card debt on Thursday morning? Well, it's going to be a negative number because it's going to be debt. So it's a negative $13.25 times 3. Now I'm going to show you how to go through and do this. I did the work for you. You go ahead and you just multiply $13.25 times 3. And forget about the decimals. When you're done with that, you count the decimal spaces. There was 2 in this problem. 13 is 0.25. Here's 1, 2. And then you take them out and you put them right back in. 1, 2. Back them out. Put them back in. So it was a $39.75 worth of charges, which really reflects as a negative $39.75 because when you multiply a positive number like 3 times a negative number, you're going to get a negative answer. And we'll go through more of that on the next slide. But I wanted to give you that real life example of it first. All right, here's some must-know stuff. When you're going through this, when you're multiplying negative decimals or decimal times a negative decimal, just go ahead and multiply as usual. Count the decimal places at the end. Move the decimal in the answer, and then determine if the answer is positive or negative. So in this example here, we had a negative 3.77 times a negative 2.8. Once again, I did the mathematical work for you, and then you can see at the end, I counted that there were 1, 2, 3 decimal places in the problem. So I went to my answer, I backed them out, 1, 2, 3, and I put them right back in, 1, 2, 3. So I got an answer of 10.556. Now, that was a negative number times a negative number. So when I have a negative times a negative, I am going to get a positive answer. So the way I remember it is that if you have an even number of negative symbols, you're always going to have a positive answer. If you have an odd number of negative symbols, your answer will be negative. Positive times a positive is a positive. A negative times a negative is a positive. But when you have one of each or that odd number, then your answer will be negative. Okay? Let's move on and take you through one more problem. So we have a negative 9.22 times a negative 3. Well, it looks like it's going to be about a negative $30. But let's go ahead and look through the steps. So we write it out, negative 9.22 times a negative 3. And we work through the problem. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 9 is 27. And then we have to look up the decimal places. And it looks like these slid over a little bit. And I had 2 decimal places on top. So in that answer of 2766, I have to put 2 decimal places back in. So I got a 27.66. Now I have to determine, is that answer positive or negative? Well, I had a negative times a negative, and a negative times a negative is going to equal a positive. So that is a positive 27.66. And then my check down at the bottom, as I said at the beginning, I had about 10 times about 3. A negative 10 times a negative 3 is a positive 30. All right, time for you to try some problems. Go ahead and try this problem. Don't forget to check your answer, at least estimate it. Go ahead. All right, let's see how you did. We had 13.1 times a negative 0.5. Well, I set it up like this. Had a total of 2 decimal places. One on top and one on the bottom, total of 2. I had 6.55, and that's a negative 6.55 because it was a positive times a negative. And let me see my check. Well, I knew that half of 13 was 6.5, so my answer is about right. Then I'm taking about 13 times about half. So my answer looks correct. Good job. All right, here's your next one. Give this one a try. 2.13 times negative 3.1. Go ahead and pause. All righty, let's see how you did this. Set that problem up just like this. If you work through it, you had a couple of steps there multiplying. You had 2 decimals on top here and 1 here in the bottom. So you have a total of 3 decimal places. Put those back in. Looks like you have 6.603, and that's going to be a negative 6.603 because you have a positive times a negative. So you have an odd number of negative symbols. So that's going to be a negative answer. My check? Well, it's about 2 times about 3 is 6. So yeah, my answer is about 6, but it's negative because we have that positive times a negative. All right, got a couple more here for you. Go ahead and try this one. Getting a little bit progressively harder. All right, I'll just show you your answer to this one. Down here at the bottom, 0.20412. That's a negative times a negative, so that answer is positive. All right, let me just look at my check here. 0.25 is about 25 cents times a little less than 1. So 0.25 cents times 1 would be 25 cents. So this number is going to be a little bit less than 25 cents, and it's about 20 cents. So yeah, that makes sense to me. All right, last pause problem before I do a little bit more work. Negative 8.25 times 1.54. Go ahead and give it a shot. All right, here's your answer. It's a big one. Now you've got a negative times a positive, so your answer is going to be negative. Negative 12.7050, which is really the same as negative 12.705. You can drop that trailing 0 if you want. Does my answer make sense? Well, if I took 1 times 8, I'd have 8. And if I took another half times 8, I'd have 4. So I'd have about 12. So my answer, negative 12.705. Yeah, it looks good. All right, very good. Time for me to do a little work. One more word problem is like, how do these negative numbers work? Where do we use them? So I thought I'd start and end with a word problem today. So Bill opens a brand new checking account at his bank, but the bank makes a mistake and forgets to put any funds into that account. So his balance at the beginning of the week then is 0. Well, Bill thinks there's money in there, so he writes 13 checks for about $15.50 before he figures this out. How far overdrawn is his account? If he has overdraft protection up to $250, will all of his checks clear? I'm going to explain all of that. But first, let's just take a look at this problem. So he writes 13 checks, and the checks were worth about a negative $15.50 because they're drawing out of his account, taking money out of his account. So if you multiply that out, you'll see that he has about $201.50. Now, of course, that's a negative number, about negative $201.50. Well, what banks will do is oftentimes they give you overdraft protection. In other words, if you forget to transfer money or you run out of money in your checking account, you have money in your savings account, they'll protect you up to a certain amount. In Bill's case, they'll protect him up to $250. So yes, this number here, this negative number is less than $250, so he will be covered. The overdrafts don't exceed that $250, so his checks will all clear. But remember, checking account is kind of like a credit card account, but instead of running it through a third party, the money actually comes out of your checking account, your bank account. All right, thanks so much. Oh, you want the ticket to the show? All right, here we go. 2 quickies. I know you've worked hard tonight. Give these 2 a try. All right, and the answer to today's trivia question. How many lakes are there in Minnesota? Well, more than 10,000. Although it's promoted as the land of 10,000 lakes, it actually has 15,291 acres of, or lakes of 10 acres or more. But officially, the DNR, Department of Natural Resources in Minnesota, only says that 11,842 of them are officially counted. So this is the number Mr. Zenz and Mr. Persons, your American Studies teachers, will probably say. So officially 11,842. However, if all the basins or all these little lakes that are 2.5 acres or greater were counted, we'd have 21,871 lakes. So there's so many lakes in Minnesota that a lot of them have repeated names. For instance, there are more than 200 mud lakes, more than 150 long lakes, and 120 rice lakes. That's a lot of rice lakes. Also, kind of a fun fact, Minnesota's lakes provide 44,926 miles of shoreline. That's more than the combined lakes and coastal shorelines of California. So, California. All right, take that. Okay, it's funny now in the beautiful summertime, but in January, I'll still take California. Have a good evening.